Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Well, with Google Chrome phasing out cookie tracking by 2023, the importance of collating first-party customer data has never been more important for business marketing. Planning Inc. has designed processes and marketing techniques to harness the power of such data, and Stuart Russell, the company's Chief Strategy Officer, joins us now to tell us more. Stuart, start by providing us with an insight into your own career.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in this field for about 20 years. I actually started off in a more creative marketing role where I was writing copy and doing some design in-house for a brand. And while I was there, I started working on that company's early email newsletters. So we're talking the early noughties here. And at that point, I started designing the email newsletters, figuring out the content, and became very interested in the email marketing and email newsletter world. And then from there, started becoming very interested in the technologies and the data that underpins that type of communication. And from there, I started doing more and more email marketing, planning, and strategy for a number of different brands in the travel and gaming spaces, before moving into consultancy and then finally moving into my current role here at Planning Inc.
And before we discuss your current role in Planning Inc., I do want to touch upon email marketing for a second. How effective is it in 2022, firstly? And what is your advice to business owners in terms of creating that copy that goes into email marketing?
Email remains an incredibly effective channel, and I would argue is becoming even more important than it perhaps has been historically, with brands getting it right, that is. And in terms of designing the right type of content, it really all comes down to being as relevant as you possibly can be to your audience. And on the one hand, that might involve using all the data that you have at your disposal to make sure that the messages you are sending out are on point in terms of what your customers are interested in. But it's also being rather empathetical towards your audiences and understanding more generally what it is that they're interested in from a wider perspective than just the data points are showing.
So what is Planning Inc. and how does it work?
So Planning Inc. is a first-party data agency. So we work with businesses to deliver a range of technology and marketing services to help them get as much value as possible out of the customer data that they capture and control as part of their business. So we work with them to deliver customer databases. We deliver a range of solutions that help better segment and personalize communications. And we also offer the services to actually run campaigns on our clients' behalf.
So talk to us about Google Chrome's decision to phase out cookie tracking by 2023 and what this is going to mean for businesses.
So it's part of a wider trend in the industry around privacy, which is incredibly important for businesses. Chrome's phasing out of the third-party cookies is on the back of people like Safari, who've been doing that for quite some time, but it is obviously quite significant in terms of the market share of web browser activity that Chrome owns. Really what this is stopping brands doing is it's limiting the opportunities they have to advertise digitally to their customers. So it has a big impact for brands and marketeers and business owners who are looking to go out to prospective customers or looking to acquire new customers, as it's stopping them from doing things like digital retargeting. So if you historically were to visit a retail website and search for a pair of jeans but not buy them, then you might move off from that website and go to a news website, for example. You would often see an advert there with the jeans that you might have been viewing on the website you were previously looking at. And that is no longer going to be possible, or certainly will become harder to do under these new guidelines. And the impact really is marketers who are looking to acquire customers through digital channels are going to have to look at new means of doing so. But it's also becoming increasingly important and put more focus for brands to think about customer retention. As we know, it's more cost effective and more valuable to retain customers than to acquire new ones. So as the ability or the playbook becomes smaller to acquire customers digitally, it becomes more important to focus on the customers that you do have using your first-party data.
So what is contextual advertising all about?
Contextual advertising is more about serving adverts on websites that are contextual to the page itself. So rather than serving an advert for the jeans that as you've just been browsing on another website, you would instead be serving an advert that is more relevant to the content of the page. And so there are additional suppliers out there who provide that type of technology to make sure that the adverts seem relevant in the context of what's being talked about in the copy.
And in the context of first-party data, what is involved in businesses developing this? And specifically, what type of data should they be collating?
So first-party data relates to all the data that you as a business own of around your customers. So that can include all their transactions, so transactions captured through e-commerce or transactions captured offline. It can be what they're visiting on your own website. It can be how they're engaging with your communications. It can even include your customer services data as well. And really what we do at Planning Inc. and what businesses need to be focusing on is finding ways of bringing all that data together and matching it so that you can get a true view of your customer and understand exactly everything that they're doing, really using the data that you own rather than data that you might buy or you might rent, and which is where third-party data comes in. So it's really about leveraging everything that you can access about your own customers.
So how does Planning Inc. assist businesses in this regard?
So Planning Inc.'s heritage is in building customer databases, essentially. So we work with brands to identify the key data sets that they have at their disposal, and often they sit in rather siloed ways. So they might be owned by different business owners. They might sit in different pockets of technology. And our work really is all about de-siloing that data and bringing it all together. And our technical teams are then experts at bringing together the data into one place, matching it so that we can get a true sense of each customer and understand exactly what they've done online, offline, and how they've engaged with communications.
And targeted and personalised marketing is critical in today's competitive market environment. But how can businesses turn their first-party data into effective marketing tools?
So the concept of relevant communications has really always been very important within customer marketing and retention marketing. And I think it's becoming increasingly easy, dare I say, for brands to do that with the technology that's at their disposal, though it's a construct that's always been super important. And really it's about bringing that data into communications that immediately resonate with customers. Customers are increasingly aware that data is captured about them, and they want to make sure that if that data is being captured, that it's being used for good purposes and is making their experiences more efficient and more pleasant. So really it's down to businesses to bring that data into things like emails and making sure that we're talking about products or services that are specifically relevant to the customer at a specific point in time.
And in your opinion, Stuart, is predictive targeting an underutilised marketing tool at present?
It's certainly becoming more commonplace as more and more technologies democratize the ability to do that. I think for a long time it was really the domain of larger businesses and enterprise brands, but there are more and more types of solutions there that if the data is put into the platforms, businesses are able to deliver things like predictive marketing. And it can be incredibly effective. It's certainly something that we deliver for our clients. Brands just have to be mindful of how it's being used and the types of things that it's recommending and delivering to customers, and the types of experiences that it's engendering as communications are sent out.
And in terms of your data marketing 360 product offering, what process do you follow with your clients?
Really the key is to understand exactly the data sources that our clients have at their disposal and figuring out ways of commonizing it across the business. So different data will sit in very different ways. It will look very different. It will throw out different views of a customer. And a big part of our work is to uncomplicate that and simplify things for our clients, making sure that it's all brought together into one place that can then be easily accessed by our brands. And I think that's very important, really. So for businesses to be able to use the data that they spend a lot of time and effort collecting and collating, they need to be able to access it in a really simple way that helps them make decisions and understand their customers and then send communications to them that are relevant.
So provide us with an insight into Planning Inc.'s current customer base.
Yes, of course. So we work predominantly in retail. We have a number of clients in the spaces such as casual dining, some B2B clients, but retail's really been a big industry for us and is a big focus area for us going forwards. And specifically within there, we work with a lot of clients who are clicks and bricks retailers. So they have both a store presence on the high street and also big e-commerce presence. And our work with them spans a few different areas, really. There's working with brands to create those single customer views, those unified IDs of customers so that marketeers can understand exactly who their customers are. And we also deliver the predictive analytics solutions that you talked about. So helping brands send communications that anticipate what customers might be interested in next, both from a product perspective, but also potentially types of categories that they might want to shop in. And we see, some really significant results as a result of brands investing in this type of technology. Certainly we see from a personalization perspective a huge uplift in engagement with our client communications. We see things like click rates and revenue increasing by between 20 and 30% as brands personalize and target their email marketing more effectively, for example. And then there are things like being able to increase the ability for businesses to access their data. So we see businesses with very long lead times between asking a question about what their customers are doing and then receiving the results as people analyze the data in slightly inefficient ways. We look to increase that dramatically, massively reducing those lead times from weeks into hours, essentially. So there are a number of different use cases and case studies and results depending on exactly what our clients are trying to do. But ultimately, it's about accessing data quickly, being able to use it and sending personalized communications that really cut through in the inbox.
And Stuart, based on your experience with email marketing, I'm interested in finding out what the optimum times are to send an email to a client database, and also how often is appropriate to do so, once a week, twice a week, once a month. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's very different depending on the business. There are some platforms out there that will automatically optimize your email send times based on how your recipients are engaging with your communications. But without that type of platform in place, it's really about testing. It's about trying different things and analyzing the results, looking at when your emails are being clicked on the most, depending on what time of the day you're sending out, and seeing what the optimum time is for you. It's very different from industry to industry, very different from brand to brand. And in terms of the number of communications that you send out, again, it's very dependent. If you've got a lot to say and a very engaged base who are really anticipating the communications that you're sending out, then really you can just keep an eye on your unsubscribe rates, the number of people who are clicking on subscribe at the bottom or top of your emails to see when you're sending too much. And if you see a little rise in your unsubscribes, then you know that you're sending too many emails out. And again, it's really about just testing over a period of time and looking at what works best for your audience.
Yeah, it's good practical advice. Now, of course, marketeers are adaptable creatures. This has been demonstrated by how they have embraced online technologies. Now, in recent months, there has been much talk about the transformative impact of the Metaverse. Where do you think that the Metaverse can create opportunities for marketeers?
There's a huge amount of opportunity there, and it's really very exciting. I think looking at it from our perspective and in our world, I think it's an opportunity for brands to start from scratch, really, with how they approach privacy and how they approach customer interaction. The Metaverse is going to represent another way for customers to opt into your communications, essentially. And I think the brands that are very transparent with that process as the Metaverse evolves, and then the brands who can easily or efficiently match the Metaverse experience with their online or offline experiences and match those customer interactions together are the ones that are going to steal the march in that sector.
And in terms of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, what are your thoughts on those from a marketing perspective?
Again, it's a very exciting opportunity. It's not something that we've worked with our clients too much on just at the moment, but I know a number of agencies who are very interested in this, and it affords a lot of opportunity down the line.
And from your own insights, what are the other emerging marketing trends that businesses need to be aware of in 2022?
I think the concept of empathy is really important. So empathy is a really interesting framework that brands can plot their marketing strategy out across. And on the one hand, it's simply thinking about things from their customer perspective and thinking about the communications that they're sending out and whether it's right and salient for their audience. On the other hand, empathy can be more than a guiding principle, and it can be a real strategy by which they approach how they build up their data capability and how they talk about how data is being captured and processed. Customers want to see this type of transparency, and I think the more empathetical that brands can be, the more traction and the more long-term engagement they will gain from their customer base.
And is it true to say that empathy is best communicated through video over text?
I think empathy can be communicated across any channel or any content type, really. I think consistency is really important, whatever type of creative tool you're using. As long as customers are seeing a consistent and joined-up message across the different touch points with which they're engaging with the business, the more they'll be assured that they're getting a great service from the business, and more they'll understand the proposition and message that they're being given.
Privacy is in the headlines every day, and of course GDPR surrounding that. What are your thoughts about how privacy is going to interfere with a business's ability to market its products and services going forward?
It's going to become more and more pressing for businesses to get their house in order and to rely heavily on their first-party data. Even then, they have to be very clear about how they're capturing data and what they're using that data for. And going back to that point around empathy, really, it's the brands that can give a very clear steer to their visitors and their customers about how that data is being used that will ultimately earn the trust of their customers and keep retention.
You mentioned it earlier, data. It is absolutely a goldmine within a business if it's nurtured properly, but most businesses probably don't value that asset. For business owners that are in that frame of mind today, what advice have you got for them?
I think you've got to recognise that it's a long-term process and that you need to go into a data strategy in a phased approach, but being assured that the payoff is clear and that it is well worth the investment and time. And really, the more you focus on your customer data and the more you understand your customers, the more you're likely to grow and succeed as a business in increasingly competitive markets.
Going forward then, for Planning Inc., is it your focus to go deeper into the retail space or to widen out that sectoral approach that you're taking?
So our solutions and services are industry agnostic. Retail is absolutely an area that we've got a lot of traction in. I think what we're looking to do is make our services more accessible to a different type of business. So historically, a lot of our clients have been in the enterprise space. I think we've invested quite heavily in our solutions and in our database build technology to make what we do more accessible to brands that are perhaps a lower level turnover and perhaps with a smaller customer base. And we think that's a really important play for us going forwards.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Stuart Russell from Planning Inc., and he certainly has provided marketeers with some interesting insights this morning.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.